Right now, Iran is constantly in global headlines. Tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States dominate the news. And if you only know Iran from television or social media, the image is usually the same. A closed country, a dangerous place, a society that feels hostile to outsiders. Many people imagine strict rules everywhere, angry crowds, and a place where tourists simply wouldn't feel comfortable visiting. So when I told friends and viewers that I was planning to travel to Iran, the reactions were predictable. Some were surprised, some were worried. And a few people asked me directly, is it actually safe to go there? For context, I've traveled to more than 58 countries around the world, across very different cultures and political systems. I'm also an atheist, and I've always been very open about the fact that I don't like when religion controls governments or limits personal freedoms. So honestly, I expected Iran to be a place I might struggle with. But after actually traveling through the country and spending time with Iranian people, I realized something very quickly. The reality of Iran is far more complex than the image most of us see in the headlines. And in this video, I want to show you the side of Iran that rarely appears in the news. One of the biggest surprises for me in Iran was the people. Before coming here, I expected a more distant society. That's often how Iran is portrayed in international media. But what I experienced on the ground was completely different. For example, while exploring Maharlu Salt Lake near Shiraz, we noticed a group of locals having a picnic by the lake. Within minutes, they invited us to join them. They offered homemade food and insisted that we sit down and eat with them. It was one of those travel moments you simply can't plan. And it wasn't a one-time thing. In Isfahan, while visiting the beautiful Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque, something similar happened in a completely different way. A group of young students noticed my cameras and started waving enthusiastically, almost competing with each other just to appear in the video. It was playful, spontaneous, and incredibly friendly. Later in Shiraz, several female students approached many of the foreigners in our group and asked if they could take photos together. They were curious, excited, and genuinely happy to meet travelers from other parts of the world. And this kind of interaction kept happening. In the historic Vakil Bazaar, shop owners invited us into their stores, offered tea, and proudly showed the crafts they create. Sometimes people even stopped us on the street just to ask a simple question. What do you think about Iran? And something I heard many times from locals was this. They often feel that international media shows only one side of their country. Many people politely asked us to share their real story with the world. For them, meeting travelers is not just curiosity. It's also a chance to show that the people of Iran are very different from the image many outsiders have in their minds. Another thing I noticed while traveling in Iran is something many visitors also mention. There is often a big difference between government policies and the people you meet in everyday life. Outside the country, these two things are often seen as the same, but on the ground, the reality feels much more complicated. During my time in Iran, I spoke with people in several different cities. And what became clear very quickly is that Iranian society cannot simply be divided into two groups. It's not just supporters and opponents. The situation is much more nuanced. I met people who supported the current system, but still openly complained about certain restrictions or economic problems. I also met people who were clearly critical of the government, but had no interest in returning to the old monarchy. Others believed the monarchy was actually a better period in Iran's history. And of course, there were also people who believed the entire political system should change. What this showed me is that Iran is not a country with one single voice. It's a complex society shaped by history, culture, politics, and many different identities. And when you actually speak with people face to face, you quickly realize that reducing Iran to a single narrative simply doesn't reflect the reality of the country. One of the most common questions people ask before traveling to Iran is very simple. Is it safe? In Western media, Iran is often portrayed as an extremely dangerous place. Many people imagine instability or serious risks for travelers. It's also true that several governments issue travel advisories for Iran, and political tensions can make the situation seem complicated from the outside. But daily life on the ground can look quite different. Before our trip, we were carefully informed about local laws and social norms. And this is important because some rules may feel unfamiliar to foreign visitors. During our time in Iran, we did have a few moments that reminded us of these rules. One day, I was sitting on a bench with my legs crossed in a way that felt completely normal to me. But a morality officer politely approached and explained that sitting like that in public was considered inappropriate. It wasn't aggressive. It was more like a firm reminder about local etiquette. Another time, because we were traveling with cameras, we had to be careful about filming certain people or security areas. At the airport, one of our friends accidentally recorded security officers even though he knew the rule. They noticed and briefly took him into a separate room. Of course, we were a bit nervous while waiting outside, but after a short conversation, he came back out smiling. He told us the officers simply warned him and let him go once they understood he was a tourist without bad intentions. Experiences like these reminded us that rules are taken seriously in Iran. But during the entire trip, we never experienced violence or a situation that made us feel personally unsafe. In fact, most of the tension we felt came from the fears we had carried with us from years of outside media narratives, not from anything we actually experienced on the streets. Quick question for you. Before watching this video, would you have considered Iran a dangerous destination? Let me know in the comments. Another thing that truly surprised me while traveling across Iran was the country's cultural richness. One of the first things you notice is the tea culture. In Iran, tea is not just a drink, it's a social ritual. Throughout the trip, we were constantly invited into shops, homes, and gatherings where people insisted we sit down and share tea with them. Sometimes this happened in bazaars, sometimes in small stores, sometimes completely spontaneously on the street. It became a small but very meaningful window into Iranian hospitality. The bazaars themselves are fascinating places. We explored several of them, including the Grand Bazaar and Tajrish Bazaar in Tehran, Vakil Bazaar in Shiraz, and the historic Grand Bazaar in Isfahan. These markets are not just shopping areas. They are living cultural centers where commerce, history, and everyday life blend together. Walking through narrow corridors filled with carpets, spices, handicrafts, and traditional workshops feels almost like stepping into another era. And then there is the architecture. Places like Golestan Palace, Persepolis, Naqsh Rostam, Nasir al Mulk Mosque, and the breathtaking Naqsh Jahan Square in Isfahan reveal how rich and sophisticated Persian civilization has been for centuries. But Iran is not only about monuments. It is also deeply connected to poetry and literature. In Shiraz, we visited the tomb of Hafez, one of the most beloved poets in Persian history. Even today, locals come here not only to remember him, but also to read poetry and reflect. Traveling through Iran often feels like moving through layers of civilization. Ancient empires, literature, art, religion, and everyday life all exist side by side, and that combination makes the country incredibly fascinating to explore. One of the most discussed topics before traveling to Iran was the situation of women. In Western media, the narrative is often very one-dimensional. Many people imagine that women are almost invisible in daily life. It's true that there are strict rules and expectations placed on women. And some of these restrictions are things many modern societies would find difficult to accept. Before arriving in Iran, this was also something I was very curious about. But once I started traveling through the country and observing daily life, I realized the reality is more complex than many stereotypes suggest. During our journey, we interacted with many Iranian women. In bazaars, restaurants, museums, and public spaces, women are very visible in everyday life. You see them studying, working, shopping, walking in parks, and spending time with friends and family. In many places, the atmosphere felt quite social and normal. I also noticed that the way women dress varies more than many outsiders might expect. Some women wear traditional clothing. Others wear a light scarf loosely covering their hair. During our trip, we even saw women in some areas without headscarves. Occasionally, the women traveling in our group also removed their scarves briefly. Sometimes, morality officers approached and politely reminded people about the rules. But outside of those moments, everyday interactions with local women felt relaxed and natural. What I realized is that two things can be true at the same time. Women are clearly visible and active in Iranian society, but there are also legal and social restrictions that shape everyday life. Understanding that balance is important when trying to understand modern Iran. Another thing that surprised me while talking with viewers, especially from the United States, is how many people believe Iran is an Arab country. It's an understandable mistake. Iran is located in the Middle East, and most people in the region are Muslim. But culturally and historically, Iran is very different from the Arab world. The majority of people in Iran are Persian, not Arab. And the main language is Farsi, also known as Persian. Arabic and Persian belong to completely different language families. Arabic is a Semitic language, while Persian is an Indo-European language. Persian civilization existed for thousands of years, with empires like the Achaemenid Empire long before the modern Arab world took shape. This is why many Iranians feel a strong connection to their Persian cultural identity, and when you visit places like Persepolis, that identity becomes impossible to miss. One of the most interesting parts of traveling through Iran was simply observing everyday life, because when you watch international news, you mostly hear about politics and conflict. But what you rarely see is how ordinary people actually live, and in many ways, daily life in Iran can feel surprisingly familiar. In big cities like Tehran, Shiraz, and Isfahan, you see young people hanging out in cafes, families walking in parks, and friends gathering in restaurants late into the evening. In recent years, especially in Tehran, modern cafe culture has become very popular among the younger generation. Coffee shops have turned into social spaces where people meet, talk, and relax. Parks are also very lively places. Families bring food, children play, people walk, and friends sit together talking for hours. Family life seems to play a very central role in Iranian culture. It's common to see several generations spending time together in bazaars, parks, and restaurants. For me, seeing this everyday side of Iran was very important. Because beyond the headlines and politics, people's daily routines are often surprisingly relatable. Sometimes understanding a country doesn't start with politics or monuments. Sometimes it simply starts by watching how people live their everyday lives. After traveling across Iran, one question kept coming back to my mind. Why is this country so misunderstood? The answer is complicated. Part of it comes from decades of political tensions, sanctions, and international conflicts. For many people in the West, especially in the United States, Iran mostly appears in the news during moments of crisis. So the image people form about the country is shaped more by headlines than everyday reality. From my perspective, part of this misunderstanding also comes from the actions of Iran's political system. Some strict laws and policies contribute to the negative perception of the country internationally. But geopolitics also plays a role. Iran has enormous oil resources and a strategic position in the Middle East. For decades, that has made the country a central focus for major global powers. Because of this, the narrative surrounding Iran is often influenced by political interests and international power struggles. But when you actually travel inside the country, another layer becomes visible. If you respect the local laws and cultural norms, daily life can feel quite stable. In my experience, Iran often felt safer than many people expect. And culturally, it may be one of the richest and most fascinating countries in the region. Interestingly, even Iranians who criticize their own government often strongly oppose foreign intervention. There is a deep sense of national pride connected to Iran's long history as the heart of ancient Persian civilization. All of these factors together help explain why the gap between perception and reality can be so large. And that gap is one of the main reasons Iran remains one of the most misunderstood countries in the world. After traveling across Iran, one thing became very clear to me. The Iran you see in the headlines is only part of the story. Beyond the politics, I found welcoming people, ancient history, beautiful architecture, rich culture, and everyday lives that felt far more relatable than many outsiders might expect. Iran is not a perfect country, no country is. But it might be one of the most misunderstood places on earth. And sometimes the only way to truly understand a place is to see it with your own eyes. And now I'm curious, before watching this video, what was your honest impression of Iran? And did anything in this video change your perspective? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy discovering new places and different cultures, don't forget to subscribe to Alp Galip Travels for more travel experiences from around the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next journey.